Well, thank you for, I was talking with several of you before, and I get to pick and choose a little bit more these days what I do, but this is the fun stuff. I do have a little bit of a history with you folks in that actually early in my career I was worked with the Forest Service as a recreation planner at Lake Tahoe. So I've got some field experience, but I'm not sure whether mid-70s counts these days. Things have changed a little bit since then. But I have been working with the Willamette for some time. I think my first research project with the Willamette was back about 1988 on Mount Jefferson Wilderness. But over time, had a lot of work up in the McKenzie area, with the H.G. Andrews, but a lot of your publics. And so what does the public think about the Forest Service? Stanley Assaw was going to talk about that and couldn't make it today. He's a University of Washington scientist, and Cheryl asked me to take that one on, so I'll give that a try. And how can understanding public attitudes help us with our communication and building trust? It just so happens that one of my current projects is I'm a team leader of an international team of U.S., Canadian, and Australian researchers who are dealing with this very issue. We've had workshops in all three countries, and it's in at-risk communities. How do stakeholders and agency personnel come together to trust each other enough to come to yes, whatever yes might be, for them. So I like talking about these things. These are important to me. And we're going to address some things today that you already know. But it's good to be reminded about them and put them kind of in place. Some common sense ideas, maybe not so commonly applied. So common sense, not commonly applied. Hopefully some new things. And I was talking with Meg earlier, at the end I'm going to have some things that really require much more in-depth thinking, that much more than we have time for today, but it'll be a start. So, what does the public think about the Forest Service? That was a question. Now, there is an answer. There is an answer for that, all right?
You're such a scientist.
Yes. You know, the social sciences, this is. But I think we can all relate to this. We all get this. Let's have a little perspective here. It depends on the issue. It depends on the problem. It depends on where you are. I have this book on my shelf. I don't know if some of you may recall, maybe Cass, she's a policy person. She may have read this long ago, Staking Out the Terrain. It was written in 1985 about the federal agencies. And in those days, there were two bureaucratic superstars: the Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Forest Service. You guys were superstars in the 60s, 70s, and through the 80s. A get things done group, and people recognized the Forest Service for that. Okay? Then things started to change a bit. Things started to kind of creep in, like NEPA and ESA and the National Forest Management Act, all those things that brought change, and people's expectations changed with that, about what you should be doing, what you should be looking at, what's important to them. And now there are many other new things and it's not so much people's expectations that you between environmental ideas and industry ideas, it's with some frustration perhaps that government can't get anything done at all. So in any case, you get the idea. It depends. So what is it about the public? What about the public? Well, there is no public. There is no one public. There are a lot of publics, many publics. And it's important for us to think about this idea, about for any given issue, any given problem, and the publics come and go. They come depending on where you plan a project, what your interest is. The old NIMBY syndrome. Everything's fine as long as something's happening over there, but when that treatment comes to be outside the forest outside my back door, it can be a different story. So there are many publics, and the game is always changing because of this. And these days, let's be real honest about it, about how people view the trust question. These days, there's little trust in big government, big business, and bureaucracies. We all know this. We all know this. This point was brought home to me up in the Bitterroot Valley after the fires in 2000. Everybody loves the firefighters. Thank you for all your efforts. The Forest Service, not so much. The community put this sign up to the Forest Service. Everything that we love is gone, up in smoke, mismanagement. This was the last year of Clinton and Gore's administration. Took the big guys to task. Big government, big business, bureaucracies, not so much. Just in case the BLM folks in the audience are feeling left out, the Forest Service is the only one that gets picked on. This, of all things, this has to do with a recreation issue. Yes, this is down on the Rogue River, management of the Rogue. In any case, big business, big government, bureaucracies, it's tough for people to have trust in those organizations today. A lot of it is because of inaction. Look at how people feel about Congress these days. The approval rating is in the teens somewhere. But that doesn't mean that things can't happen. It's part of this perspective idea. I have always felt that the best work of the Forest Service, has always been done at the Ranger District level. Everybody knows Bill Anthony and the kind of job he's done over in the Sisters Ranger District. An example of the kinds of things that have been, the kinds of relationships that are built. And that's what this idea of public interaction, building trust, it is about building relationships. Bill, in his career, had done an excellent job. And there are many good examples around. You may not know it or remember it, but these are the days right after the Northwest Forest Plan. And there was a lot of activity here in Oregon and Washington particularly about ecosystem management. And some of you remember the old adaptive management area days. A couple of us social scientists tapped in, and you are quite well known, as a matter of fact, here on the Willamette. One of the highly featured articles, most read articles in the Journal of Forestry is from what happened right here on the Willamette National Forest in the 1990s. The forest made a commitment to 5 collaborative groups, and we tracked them. And we assessed what happened in those 5 groups. Well, there were a lot of things that I think one woman described her experience in the group as the most arduous experience of my life. But we had a lot of good things in that we went across these 5 groups, and we did pull out enough for a nice little piece in the Journal of Forestry. Public participation in forest planning, 8 attributes of success. All right? And actually, there is some notoriety involved in this. This little piece was actually chosen as one of the 25 best articles, no, one of the 10 most highly read best articles written for the Journal of Forestry in the last 25 years. I happen to think it's because it's 3 pages long, and there's 8 things here. People can hey, I can read that, and maybe there's actually something in there I can use. So, Meg, I don't know if you've seen this, but I'll leave that. So there are a number of really good success stories, part of the stuff that we've been doing over the last few years. Here are some good ones, quite good ones, that we featured this last year in a DVD. Cheryl, do you have this?
I sent it out.
Send it out. Okay, so we actually, I had a team that went to these places. We did our homework, and Cass and a number of others helped us identify some places where some real good collaborative work was going on. And you can see Forest Service BLM up there. These places, they're featured in a half-hour DVD about the experiences that people are having on the ground. So our research also is telling us things about, in general, what are the from places like this, other research across the country, in general, what are the qualities that people look for in forest managers? Okay, so kind of some real basic understanding of what is it? Well, they look for competence, belief in managers' ability to make good decisions and effectively implement practices. They want to know that you can do the job. All right? They want to know that you're fair and equitable. Essentially, belief that managers are sincere and genuinely engaged citizens about plans and decisions. That the individual will act in the best interest of the community. They want to feel that way about you. Also, some sense of shared values, that managers are perceived to have the same concerns and priorities as the community, and that you're going to pay attention to local places important to stakeholders. I was at a meeting one time, and I thought, what a brilliant idea. I think it was do they still have landscape architects in the Forest Service? Okay. There was a planning process, and this guy was a landscape architect, and he had a room full of people. And before they did anything, he got up, and as you all do so well, you make great maps. He put up a map of the project area, and there were members of the public in the group, and he said, okay, this is the area that we want to put this XYZ treatment out on. He gave everybody a felt marker, and he says, step up here, draw a circle around places that are important to you. Those became focal places. It might have been their home, it might have been a place where a lake where they took their family, but it was a way to start a conversation about, okay, here are important places for us, and we need to be aware of them. That's part of the conversation. The other thing, and actually this came from the Canadians, accountability. Doing what you say you will do. Building up credibility over time through promise keeping. Accountability. So let's get back a little bit here. These are kind of the big ideas, and that they certainly make good sense, but let's get back to the perspective issue, okay? Citizen agency interactions. In most cases, it's a lack of trust or some skepticism that's usually the starting point. After all, you don't get to pick who you work with all the time. You may not know them, or you may have little experience with them. And the idea is that people are going to wait and see. They want to know if you're going to be able to deliver. The idea here with this idea of, hi Josh, this idea of a little skepticism, and as we like to play it a little bit, maybe hopefully it's healthy skepticism, is that parties need to be able to trust each other enough to allow them to begin to work together. So the idea is we need time and experience before we can come to trust one another. And so let's take a look at this idea, how it plays out. Down below, the lighter blue, when there's something going on, when there's a plan in the works, or there's like a meeting or a stakeholder or a collaborative or whatever it might be, it's like, okay, people start to form expectations about the future of that relationship based on their reputation with you or your reputation with the community, your past behaviors. And, okay, do we have enough trust? Have enough trust to be willing to take a risk and initiate some cooperative effort? Then the idea is jump into the loop. Let's aim for some realistic, maybe some modest outcomes to begin with. We're not taking on big stuff. Let's start out with something we can handle together. Okay, right? So initially modest, where we can build on some successful outcomes. And that reinforces the trusting attitudes amongst ourselves, amongst the group and the community. And we can build a foundation then for more ambitious things as we move through that. So this is the idea of enough. Do we have enough to get started and get into this loop and start working with others? Let's talk about real life, all right? Your job. Let's recognize the context in which you work. Agencies and managers regularly encounter a range of conditions, projects, interested stakeholders. We know there are small-scale kinds of things. I talk with the Canadians and managers, young managers in the provincial government, feeling like, this is my job. People should just trust me to do it because I'm the professional. I've been educated to do this, and I should be able to go out on a day-to-day, and they should trust me to do my job. Well, that might be okay. But even small-scale management activities can get a little more complex. But often these kinds of things are informal interactions where trust is built through mutual experience and successful implementation of low-risk activities. Let's recognize that not everything is big. There are a lot of just day-to-day kinds of things, but those are important in building those relationships. It's kind of looks like this. Small wins, the small wins approach. Trust evolves over time as participants interact and move gradually through modest local projects. You become known in the community. You become known for getting things done. You become known for keeping your word. Become known for being concerned about places that are important to people. All right? And we know you kind of go up the scale. You have mid-range activities, and nowadays you have large-scale activities as well. And this may involve multiple agencies, many organizations and stakeholders, often to meet the requirements of a government initiative. In Oregon here, not on the Willamette, but over on the Deschutes and down on the Fremont-Wanyama, the large CFLRPs, the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Projects. These are big ideas. These are big multi-party, multi-stakeholder projects. Probably the prescribed fire projects you are planning in Mount Jefferson, Mount Washington, Three Sisters Wilderness. You might put that in this category as being high stakes with a lot of players. And as I said, often these are government initiatives. They often involve the formation of a collaborative. These are complex projects and they require coordination, some deliberation. It really requires, this isn't a small wins day-to-day kind of thing. This requires some real planning, some real coordination of how are we going to structure this? Not only within our own organization, but across agencies, interagency. How are we going to structure the various stakeholders? What's their role going to be? And what's our commitment to one another in the long term to help us plan and implement projects like this? Okay? So I know you're being asked to do more of these kinds of things. All right, reboot reminder.
Now everybody knows I'm not energy conscious.
Yes. Oh, okay. All right.
Can you see where?
Yeah, let's see. Hold on. I think that's it right there.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Okay. So let's pause. Let's take a breath for a minute. and add some structure to this idea of citizen perspectives, trust building, because we know that we can plan for this. Not everything just happens out of our back pocket, not everything just happens on a daily basis. There are, particularly in these larger activities, there are some different levels of responsibility. So I've broken them down into three levels here for us so that we realize that, okay, as management agencies, as the Forest Service and the BLM, we have some internal responsibilities to relationships with the public, to building trust, to our own personnel. So there's some responsibilities within the agencies themselves. And then there's the individual managers that have a role both working within their organization and across agency lines with other managers, but also they're the face of the agency in the community, working with organized groups, working with property owners, working with the stakeholders who come and go. And then there's, if we're really going to get serious about this idea, then there's the stakeholders themselves. And stakeholders can be defined simply as anybody who has a stake in the outcomes. So there are really three levels at play here, and each has some level of responsibility that goes with it. But I think also that there is some things that we can identify. So on the right-hand side of this is this idea of, if we're thinking about at the agency level about trust building, developing relationships, there's a set of desired outcomes for the agency itself. Things like, well, we want to have cooperation with other agencies. We want to support managers in their multi-party role. And we want to have an effective community outreach strategy. Well, the things on the left there, that's how we get there. Those are the kind of contributory actions that lead us to positive relationships that, from an agency standpoint, internal to our agency. We coordinate projects and resources across boundaries. We publicly commit to multi-party relationships with other agencies and stakeholders. We develop the internal capacity to respond to public concerns. Do we have the right kind of people in the interface job? It's not something that everybody can do. We want to make sure the right people are there and they have the resources to work with, and so on. Transparent and open decision-making processes. There's a set of actions that can get us there. I can't tell you how often I have heard the word transparency when it comes to working in communities. And I'm hearing it from citizen groups. They want to be able to, want to be able to understand how plans are being achieved, how decisions are being made. And they want to know about that up front. Another agency idea, accessible and reliable, in this case, fire information. Community cooperation and collaboration. So there are steps to get there. So then there's another set as well for the person operating at the manager level, working kind of in between. This might be somebody working at the ranger district level, might be a field technician, field personnel, but the person who's in the community is really the face of the agency. So desired outcomes foster shared responsibility, commitment to open participative planning, and there are contributory steps to get there. All right? And other outcomes, establish an established communication program. Let's build community capacity. Be able to frame risk in the context of conditions and options. For example, the big part of that interface job in building a relationship and building trust with people is being genuine, being honest, being not afraid to say, I'm not sure or I don't know. People want to know three things, basically, when you are working with them. three big ideas. When I say people, community groups, citizens, they want, and it's a kind of an alliteration process. Serious, certain, soon. They'd like to know how serious the problem is. All right? So to the extent you can help them understand how serious this fire management issue is, forest health problems, endangered species, whatever it might be. They want to know, well, how certain are you? Do you really know? Is this really going to happen? And soon. How soon is it going to happen? Are we talking about this fire season, this year? Are we talking about, is this a problem we've got to deal with 5 or 10 years down the road? So serious, certain, soon are things that you can help people with. And then we get at the individual stakeholder level. These are things, if you have organized groups, if you're bringing people in the door, if you're looking at collaborative process, they're kind of setting some rules of the game as to how we're going to interact with one another. We're going to agree on some guidelines about how we treat one another, how we speak to one another, what kind of language we're going to use. All of these things go into building trustworthy relationships. Okay? So there is a lot that can be done depending on the desired outcome, and it's not like every manager should take a list and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do today. Nobody says, oh, I think trust is important. They wake up in the morning and they get out of bed and say, well, I think I'm going to go build me some trust today. No. Meg and I were talking about this. She has like did you just had a 6-year plan? Is that what you were a 6-year cycle? Yeah, maybe 10. Okay. These are cumulative kinds of things. And these ideas here, particularly the one on the left-hand side, they don't fit all situations, but they are useful ideas that a responsible individual can pick and choose given the particular situation. I'm reminded of this happened quite some time ago, but it's a little story that I think says a lot. I was up in Portland for a workshop at the regional office, and I had stayed over at a hotel the night before, and I needed to get to the office, and I called a cab, and I jumped in the back of the cab, and I said, I want to go to the Forest Service office down on Front Street. And the voice from the front of the cab says, I hate the Forest Service. And I looked up at this guy. It was the first time I really paid any attention to him. First of all, he was huge. He took up most all the front seat. All right? He had cut-off sleeves, a lot of ink down both arms. He had long, stringy, greasy hair, a lot of piercings, and frankly, he stunk. And at that moment, all I wanted to say was, oh yeah, I hate the Forest Service too. But I said to him, well, why is that? And he says, well, they just closed my favorite hunting area. I said, well, I'm pretty sure it doesn't have anything to do with you. I said, it's getting to be fire season. We've had a rough year. Things are about ready to explode out there. They got recreation users they've got out there. They've got hunters. People are in harm's way. And there's homes out there as well. And then not another word was said. He didn't respond. We got to Front Street, the regional office, and as we pulled the curb, he turns to me and he says, I wouldn't want their job. So I went into the meeting, and it was on some of this kind of stuff. And I actually told the story in the meeting because the point I wanted to make to the agency folks who were in the room is that when you can take it away, take the bureaucracy out of the picture and become human, that's when trust can be built. That's when relationships are built. When people like this guy can see you as a person who perhaps shares their values or places that are important to you, then it becomes real. Then it becomes, there's maybe just enough trust to get on that loop. I'm going to leave this here. Cheryl, you'll have this. As I told him, I like talking about this stuff. I have, if you want to have a continued conversation about what to do with all of this, I'm happy to do that. I think there are some kind of implications we can take from this. Field personnel are going to need broad agency support in these kinds of efforts. You can't put people out there and expect them to do it on their own. They need agency support and commitment. In some places, that agency capacity to commit is going to be an issue. When we have more time, I have many stories about places who have found a way to make that work, and some not so much. Some of them pertain right here to the Willamette, both sides of that equation. Staff turnover is going to be a problem. We all know how that works. One of the reasons that Bill Anthony was so successful in Sisters is that he made a commitment to the community to be there for the long term. This one we're seeing so much more of these days. Shifting populations, urban to rural, makes trust building more challenging. The demography of the Northwest particularly is such that we are gaining in population, but it's not by new births, it's by people moving in from other areas. And they bring their values with them from other places. They bring their values with them, and they bring their lack of understanding about how natural systems work. There's a big job to do with those folks. But you don't need to do it alone. You've got help in the communities to do that. Building and maintaining trust carries through all phases of forest management. In natural resources, no decision is made in isolation from other events. It's what you did in the past, what you're doing right now, how well you've done your job, what kind of relationship you have with people currently and in the future. They're all related. So I think I am going to close here. I'm happy to talk about any of this. How are we doing on time?
You have 5 minutes for
Oh my gosh. I was worried that I was going to get carried away.
Oh, you're good.
All right. But,
Questions for Bruce? Some story he might have intimated at that you're wondering what it was, and if it was about you.
I guess I'm curious to hear more around your thoughts on bullet number 2. What are some of is there commonalities that you see where it is issue or problematic, or can you just expand on that?
Making it, some places, some of you may be familiar with a guy named Rick Brazel. Okay, Rick was the forest supervisor on the Colville until a year or two ago. And I don't know where he got it, but he came in and he got the idea, and will actually say, and I think he says it in this DVD, because he says, we're going to do collaboration wall to wall. And that's just the way we're going to do business. Not everybody thinks like that. Not everybody has that frame of reference or background. And I mentioned the Canadians, for example. There's been a real it's not a disconnect, there's been forest management in Canada has been its own private little enterprise, and citizens have not been as questioning of different practices. And you can look around different places here and see that. I do work in the Great Basin, for example, the Great Basin ecosystems. that's a real tough commitment for particularly the BLM and the Forest Service to make the collaboration the way that they've been doing business for decades there. And they haven't really had to, but they're finding out that they do. And it's a tough chore. But this idea in Canada where now they are starting to have fires. And fires, for example, Slave Lake Fire 2 years ago. 400 homes lost, 10,000 people evacuated. But they haven't had the kinds of issues and the environmental legislation to deal with that we have in the U.S., where the public has the right of access to planning processes. But the few days that we were up there, and we actually did a workshop, there was a new community that was near Banff National Park that was emerging. And the provincial government had a plan, some prescribed burning that they wanted to do. Right outside this community that actually the community looks a lot like Black Butte Resort, much smaller. They wanted to have a role. The community wanted to have a role in this. And this was really new for the provincial government. They hadn't done this before. Had these conversations, this outreach. There was a meeting where the provincial minister came down from the capital, and 400 people showed up at this meeting of this community. There were people standing on chairs shaking their fist about, we want to have a say. We want to have more of a conversation about what you're going to do out there. And it was like, wow, this looks like stuff that we've gone through for 15, 20 years here in the U.S., and now it's emerging there. Places like that, it's making a commitment to more engagement, more collaborative kinds of activities is a tough call, or a new one anyway. Yes?
Now, in the BLM, we have very specific congressional mandates for how we manage, so there's definitely limitations on where we can collaborate. What are some things that you think we can do to involve the collaborative process? Like, what are some areas where we can, given that we have certain congressional constraints?
Well, you may feel like you have congressional constraints, okay? But I don't think your public feels that you do, okay? And they don't see the BLM lands as greatly different than the Forest Service lands or even Park Service lands. They see you as the federal guys, okay? So part of it is having a conversation with them about maybe what your mandate is, what your guidelines are. And it's always, not always, it's often, well, let's hold a public meeting and invite people to come to our place and talk to us. I would suggest maybe you go to their place. Find out where their place is so that you can have a conversation and actually just be part of their agenda of whatever else they might have going on, so you can start a conversation about what it is that you need to get done and why. The example I use in the Great Basin is just like a lot of places in the West, they've got the forest and rangeland health issues, invasive species. And fire, for example, is an excellent starting point because it's a place to find a lot of agreement. No one wants the forest to burn out, no matter what their political views are. Those are cool points.
So what's the end of your Canadian story?
The end of that Canadian story, they're still at it. Yeah. They're still at it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.